Nice shirt. Greener topic like genocide. Genocide is my usual topic of choice, but we're gonna be doing something a bit different. So there's a few things I'd like to talk about that is connected to the recent terrorist attack on Russia. One is, and that is a very hilarious demand that Russia has recently made, namely, Russia demands extradition of Ukraine security chief and others for terrorism. Russia of all countries in the world, is now claiming that international law matters and actually Ukraine should behave itself and extradite the villainous Vasyl Malyuk, the chief of security service of Ukraine. This is him. This is the person that they apparently really want Ukraine to you know, extradite. Why? Because apparently Ukraine is breaking international law and doing terrorism. Unlike Russia, it's a really comical situation, because while Russia is sort of waving its empty flag of we must sort of support and we must follow international law, it has right about now 4 arrest warrants. Russia has 4 arrest warrants by the ICC against it, and the biggest one being the arrest warrant on Vladimir Putin because of the whole transfer children from one group to the other, which constitutes a genocide. Interestingly enough, in the Convention of Genocide, the UN Convention, one of the points that specifies genocide is the transferal of children from forceful transferal of children from one group to the other. Right? SBU dismisses demand as pointless and hypocritical, coming from the terrorist state itself. Russia has demanded that Ukraine extradite a number of people, including the head of the country's SBU security service, over claims they are connected with terrorist acts, and they're sort of trying to tie it to the newest terrorist act that happened, in which 140, I believe, people died at least. They're trying to pin this on Ukraine, even though ISIS already sort of said that it did it. But still, Russia has been very adamant on trying to pin this on Ukraine, and has used it to make a broader point on terrorism, saying that basically Ukraine keeps committing terrorism and now it's time to arrest and extradite those horrible, villainous Ukrainian terrorists and bring them to justice in Russia. Oh, you really can't make this up, can you? The SBU immediately dismissed the Russian demands as pointless and said that the Russian Foreign Ministry had forgotten that Vladimir Putin was the subject of an international arrest warrant. A Russian Foreign Ministry statement listed violent incidents that have occurred in Russia since the full invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, including bombings that killed the daughter of prominent nationalist. We're talking about the daughter of Alexander Dugin, the well-known fascist, and a war blogger, and an incident in which a rider was seriously hurt. So we're talking about this. Where is it? We're talking about this, but we're also talking about this. US believes Ukraine was behind killing of Dugina in Russia. New York Times says. New York Times, the very propagandistic paper on its own, in its own right. Daria Dugina, where this Russia is speaking of this. The ministry said investigation of these incidents showed that traces of these crimes lead to Ukraine. Russia has turned over to Ukrainian authorities its demands for the immediate arrest and extradition of all those connected to those terrorist acts in question, the statement said. No, this is new news that is alluding to old news. I'm going back to old news to sort of tell you what the new news is even talking about. Russia is saying in 2022 there's been this attack, there's been this attack, there's been this attack on the bridge. All these are connected to Ukraine somehow, and of course there's been this new terrorist attack. Ukraine is just a bunch of terrorists and they should all be arrested and extradited to Russia for justice, because Russia is the beacon of justice. That is basically what is being said. That is basically what is being said. And let's just go on. Russia has turned over to Ukrainian authorities its demands. We've already seen this. Among those listed in the statement to be handed over were the SBU head, Vasyl Malyuk, who has acknowledged that his service was behind attacks on the bridge linking Crimea to the Russian mainland. So basically there's been this attack in 2022 on Crimea Bridge. 2 dead after explosions on Kerch Bridge linking Crimea and Russia. Vasyl Malyuk basically acknowledged that his security service was behind attacks on it. But to me, it just makes sense for Ukraine to attack the bridge, after the full-scale invasion had already started, right? It just makes sense because it's it has been, I remember when it happened, when the whole attack on the bridge happened, it had been framed as a terrorist attack. Well, this is a military target. This is a vital military target through which Russia brings its supplies and then to Ukraine. The destruction of the Crimean Bridge is one of the biggest goals of the war. It's one of the biggest goals for victory in this war. So definitely I would not classify attacking the Crimean Bridge as a terrorist attack. It's ridiculous, It's a legitimate military target, which has been set from the very beginning when this whole thing happened. Russia seized control of Crimea in 2014 and the bridge was built after the region was annexed. The Russian side demands that the Kiev regime, which is, of course, how Russia will refer to the Ukrainian government, they will call it the Kiev regime, immediately cease all support for terrorist activity, extradite guilty parties, and compensated the victims for damages, the ministry statement said, which is, I don't know, this is the ultimate irony. This is the ultimate hypocrisy coming from Russia, spitting on international law and then saying, no, 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 it actually should be upheld. It should be totally upheld. Ukraine's violation of its obligations under the anti-terrorist conventions will result in it being held to account in international legal terms. That's the richest thing. Again, there are 4 arrest warrants by the ICC for there. I think 2 is against Russian admirals for indiscriminate bombing of cities. 1 is against Vladimir Putin himself, and what is some associate whose name I'm blanking out on. Both of them being sort of arrest warrants for transfer of children from one group to the next. It's ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous proposition. A mockery. But then again, we also must remember that Russia very famously and very loudly sort of retreated, sort of revoked its signature for the Rome Statute because it didn't like that the ICC has done some investigating into Crimea and its choosing to become part of Russia, and has classified it as sort of an annexation, and has classified it as an occupation, and has also judged that the whole voting of Crimea was complete BS. So that's Russia has a very interesting relationship when it comes to international law. Yeah, children's rights ministers and the arrest warrant is on children's rights minister, exactly, along with Vladimir Putin himself. The SBU, which is the Ukrainian Security Service, said that Russians' demands sound particularly cynical coming from the terrorist state itself. Any words from the Russian Foreign Ministry are pointless. It referred to the arrest warrant against Putin issued by the International Criminal Court in connection with the transfer of Ukrainian children to Russia and said the tribunal in The Hague is waiting for him. The Russian statement referred to the mass shooting this month at a concert hall outside of Moscow in which 144 people died, but only in oblique sense. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack, and US officials said they had intelligence showing it was carried out by the network's Afghan branch, Islamic State Khorasan Province, or ISIS-K. Russian investigators said last week they had found proof that the concert hall gunmen were linked to Ukrainian nationalists. Kyiv denies any connection with the attack. Alexander, and of course no evidence was presented, no evidence was presented. And since then, some new facts have come to light, so this whole thing is just becoming more and more interesting as we sort of continue to talk about it. As we continue to talk about it, this whole thing is becoming more and more and more interesting because there are a few new facts about the whole terrorist thing. What happens if who gets arrested? Well, then they get tried for what they've done. If they get arrested, then they just get tried for the crimes that they are being accused of. Pretty simple. Pretty simple, actually. True. And interestingly enough, very interestingly enough, there's been a few new developments. We're gonna go through them one by one, not necessarily in chronological order. Deadly Moscow concert hall attack. Russia's FSB security service said Monday that 4 people arrested over a foiled terror plot had provided money and arms for the deadly attack on a Moscow concert hall last month. More than 140 people were killed when gunmen stormed the Crocus City Hall venue on March 22nd before setting the building on fire in the most deadly attack in Russia for 2 decades. For 2 decades. The FSB said in a statement Monday that it had arrested 4 people a day earlier in the southern Dagestan region who were directly involved in the financing and supply of terrorist means to the perpetrators of the terrorist attack carried out on 22nd March in the Crocus City Hall in Moscow. Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee said on Sunday that it had apprehended 3 people who were planning to commit a series of terrorist crimes. The FSB said Monday that 4 foreign citizens had been arrested in the operation in the regional capital, Makhachkala, and the nearby town of Kaspiysk. The Interfax news agency cited an FSB video showing one of the detained men saying, "I took weapons to them. These guys who attacked Crocus City Hall, I took them weapons from Makhachkala." Russian authorities had previously accounted the arrests of 12 people they say are connected to the attack, including the 4 suspected gunmen who have been identified as Tajik citizens. The suspects charge. The investigative committee, which probes major crimes, said separately on Monday that it was formally charging another suspect with carrying out a terrorist attack. At the moment, the investigation has charged the 10 defendants, it said in a statement. Moscow courts confirmed the 10th suspect, Yakub Diony Yusufzadeh, has been detained until May 22nd, accused of having transferred money to an accomplice a few days before the attack to provide accommodation for the terrorists. Citing information provided to the court, Russian agencies reported that Yusufzadeh is also from Tajikistan. The Islamic State, IS, has claimed responsibility for the massacre, the most deadly, it says, it has ever carried out on European soil, though President Vladimir Putin has talked up a Ukrainian and Western connection, which has not been established in any way. no evidence has been provided for any of those claims. No connection has been factually established. didnt SG. You wouldn't call what facts? Welcome. Kyiv and the West have repeatedly denied any involvement and accused Moscow of exploiting the tragedy. Dagestan is a Muslim majority region in Russia's southern Caucasus region. The FSB has come under scrutiny over its failure to thwart the attack despite private and public warnings by the US intelligence community that extremists were planning an imminent attack on large gatherings in Moscow. The agency regularly announces it has foiled alleged terrorist cells, but in recent months has mainly announced the arrests of what it calls pro-Ukrainian saboteurs planning attacks on Russian military sites and infrastructure. So again, no sort of connection, no sort of evidence was brought forward, no sort of, not even an effort. So we can, so far, the whole claim looks a bit shaky at best. And there has been an even newer development. An even newer development in this whole thing. Because we know that previously, we've already known that the US has warned Russia against the incoming attack. It has warned that there might be some attack, that there might be a terrorist attack, and that it will happen probably in a concert hall. I think the US did not have the full information to provide to Russia about the details of the whole attack, which I have to, by the way, note that there's been this almost trend of countries ignoring warning of an imminent terrorist attack. But now it seems actually that the US was not even the only party that had warned Russia against the attack against the whole terrorist attack. It seems like they've not been just tipped by the US. It seems like they've also been tipped by Iran, of all places. Yeah, by their own ally, Iran. That has been giving them weapons to fight Ukraine. They've tipped them off. Why would Iran, their own allies, lie about such a thing? That would make no sense, would it? Why would Iran lie? Like the US, sure. The US is like, I guess, a hostile country. Supporting at this point would be a better sort of way to put it. Supporting Ukraine? But then Iran's not a supporter of Ukraine, so what would be the incentive? You know? Iran warned Russia of possible terrorist attacks. Information provided lacked specific details. Tehran gained information from suspects linked to Kerman attack. US intelligence also warned Russia of likely attack. Says Afghan-based ISIS-K behind both Russia and Iran attacks. So let's read. Let us get into this. Let us dig in as they say. Because, let's see. Iran tipped off Russia about the possibility of a major terrorist operation on its soil ahead of the concert hall massacre near Moscow last month. 3 sources familiar with the matter said, in the deadliest attack inside Russia in 20 years, gunmen opened fire with automatic weapons at concert goers on March 22nd at the Crocus City Hall, killing at least 144 people in violence claimed by the Islamic State militant groups. The United States had also warned Russia in advance of likely militant Islamic attack, but Moscow, deeply distrustful of Washington's intentions, played down that intelligence. But why would Russia dismiss the intelligence of their ally throughout this whole mess, throughout this whole special operation? That is just very interesting, isn't it? Again, I can understand downplaying it from the US, but Iran? It is harder, however, for Russia to dismiss intelligence from diplomatic ally Iran on the attack, which has also raised questions over the effectiveness of Russian security services. Moscow and Tehran, both under Western sanctions, have deepened military and other cooperation during the 2-year Ukraine war, like the building of drones, like Iran as a pretty major supplier of weaponry for Russia. I think it's safe to say that, I don't know. I think it's pretty safe to say that that Russia trusts Iran, no? I would assume so, but maybe I'm just misguided on the whole thing. Days before the attack in Russia, Tehran shared information with Moscow about a possible big terrorist attack inside Russia that was acquired during interrogations of those arrested in connection with deadly bombings of Iran, one of the sources told Reuters. Iran arrested 35 people in January, including a commander of Islamic State's Afghanistan-based branch, ISIS Khorasan, ISIS-K, who it said were linked to twin bombings on January 3rd in the city of Kerman that killed nearly 100 people. So it becomes a pretty embarrassing situation. Let me just say that. It becomes a little bit of an embarrassing... Whoa. You know? When Iran gives Russia intel and says, look, you might be attacked by guys connected to those ISIS-K people that we've sort of arrested and interrogated, and be careful. And not only did Russia ignore it, completely ignore it, but also decided, yeah, we're just gonna pin it on Ukraine and turn it into some weird broader campaign against the terrorism of Ukraine, and we're gonna demand that this man Vasyl Malyuk be arrested and extradited, the chief of Ukrainian security service, because apparently this Crocus thing, this newest thing that broke the camel's back, Ukraine is a band of terrorists, and they've been doing it time and time again. Listen, remember Dugina? Remember that? Yeah? Remember the terrorist attack on the Crimea Bridge. Remember that? Yeah, exactly. Exactly, bunch of terrorists. And now this. And now this mess. I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what to think. Horrible. Horrible stuff. If it wasn't for the fact that Iran, uh, Russia's biggest ally, became sort of the biggest debunker of Russia's narrative against linking the terrorist attack to Ukrainian nationalists, which is pretty hilarious. I find it a pretty, oh, you could call it a twist of fate, a little bit of a. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the Iran blasts, the bloodiest since 1979 Islamic Revolution. U.S. intelligence sources said ISIS-K had carried out both the Jan 3rd attacks in Iran and the March 22nd shootings in Moscow. Islamic State once occupied large swaths of Iraq and Syria, imposing a reign of terror and inspiring lone wolf attacks in Western countries, but was declared territorially defeated in 2017. Which is where the whole name of ISIS comes from. Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, right? ISIS. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Right? However, ISIS-K, one of its most fearsome branches, has raised the group's profile again with large-scale bloodshed. ISIS-K, named after an old term for a region that encompassed parts of Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan, emerged in eastern Afghanistan in late 2014 and quickly established a reputation for extreme brutality. So it's just I I I need to stress this once again that I find this extremely extremely interesting that this came to light and that one of Russia's biggest ally when it comes to supporting its effort in the war and the invasion has become a huge force in refuting Russia's trying to connect the attack to Ukraine, which is I didn't expect that. I didn't expect just for Iran to arrive at the scene and sort of be like, yeah, we warned Russia and sort of we it was all tied to ISIS-K that has been terrorizing Iran for quite some time now, and now it decided to also terrorize Russia. A second source who also requested anonymity due to the sensitivity of the issue said the information Tehran provided to Moscow about an impending attack had lacked specific details regarding timing and the exact target. Which, I mean, that is that is what happens, right? You get intelligence and you don't always get perfect intelligence. Sometimes there is information lacking and you have to prepare based on incomplete information. Like there will be a terrorist attack which might target vaguely this sort of venue, and it would be best for your sort of special secret services to be put on alert and try to look out for terrorism in these sort of venues. Like that's the best that can be done in this sort of situation. When you're operating on incomplete information. What you do not do, okay, this will be a little bit of a lesson. What you do not do is to completely dismiss it. That would be a pretty big example of what you should absolutely not do. But hey, I am not the genius. I am not a brilliant Russian mind. I'm not of the glorious Russian Mir, Ruski Mir, you know? I'm just a Pole. I'm just like a lesser Russian. Like I'm just the worst. I'm a discount Russian that sooner or later will have to be folded back into the Russian Empire to hopefully have a chance for improvement. You know, I'm just a Polish person, which basically Polish people are just discount Russians. So that's that's a sad reality of the situation that I have to live with, waiting for liberation by the glorious Russian Empire. They, the members of ISIS-K, were instructed to prepare for a significant operation in Russia. There we go. That's a pretty significant portion of what we're reading here. One of the terrorists arrested in Iran said some members of the group had already traveled to Russia, the second source said. So that's... Okay, you know what? It's one thing to sort of admit that the information was sort of incomplete. It's one thing to sort of acknowledge that there was no information on timing, the exact target, but there was quite a lot of information here. Like the org that was going to do it, that certain operatives of the org were already within the country. I'm pretty sure that the type of avenue that was going to be attacked was sort of given in the information. The exact target wasn't, so the exact location of the exact avenue, but the type of avenue, I'm pretty sure, was actually given. A third source, a senior security official, said, as Iran has been a victim of terror attacks for years, Iranian authorities fulfilled their obligation to alert Moscow based on information acquired from those arrested terrorists, which again directly stands against the narrative of Russia that it's tied to Ukrainian nationalists somehow. Like this stands in basically, unless some new amazing irrefutable evidence comes out, it just stands in the exact opposite of this. You know? And it's sort of ridiculous. Woof. Woof woof. But that's not all. We're not finished. We're not done. We're not done with this thing. We're not done. Ask about The Reuters report Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Monday, "I do not know anything about this." I mean, that is sort of what you'd say, wouldn't you? I do not know anything about this. Iran's foreign ministry did not reply to a request for comment on this story. The White House had no comment on the matter. A source familiar with the US intelligence on an impending attack in Russia said it was based on interceptions of chatter among ISIS-K militants. Challenging the US assertions, Russia has said it believes Ukraine was linked to the attack without providing evidence, which is a pretty important bit when you sort of make strong claims, isn't it? Like that you provide any sort of evidence? Any sort of, like, any evidence at all? That's sort of cool? No? That is sort of a thing that you would expect to happen. But no evidence needed. It's Russia. Russia, you can just trust Russia on its word, as always, as it has been the case for all of its basically existence. That's been always the case, and that will always remain the case. Tajik nationals. The attacks in Kerman and near Moscow both involve Tajik nationals. ISIS-K has aggressively recruited from the impoverished former Soviet Republic of Tajikistan, security experts say. Sources said Iran had discussed its security concerns with Tajikistan. A diplomatic source in Tajikistan confirmed that Tehran had recently discussed with Dushanbe the issue of increased involvement of ethnic Tajiks in militant activities. Islamic State harbors a virulent hatred for Shiites, Iran's dominant sect, and also the target of its affiliates attacked in Afghanistan. The hardline Sunni Muslim group views Shiites as apostates. In 2022, Islamic State claimed responsibility for a deadly attack on Shiite shrine in Iran that killed 13 people. Tehran identified the attackers as Tajik national. Earlier attacks claimed by Islamic State include twin bombings in 2017 that targeted Iran's parliament and the tomb on the Islamic Republic's founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Reuters daily briefing newspaper provides all the news you need to start your day. So there you have it. It looks like somehow in some way Iran itself became a pretty strong argument against the Russian narrative, which I will once again like to remind you Russia has provided. As strongly as it has claimed that there is a connection to the recent terrorist attack and Ukraine, it has so far provided no evidence whatsoever that such a connection exists. While we are receiving more and more information indicating very probably that such a connection might simply not exist to begin with. How unfortunate. How unfortunate. But we'll see. Maybe Russia will just, bam, tomorrow, tonight, just give us such evidence of the Ukrainian connection that we all of us will just be forced to admit in shock and disbelief that it has been true all along. Russia has been in the right all along, as it always is. Alrighty, let's go to the next thing.